Yeah, hello and welcome to my today's hands-on video, or let's call it a limitations video about the Sony RX10 Mark II you can see here. To be precise, I'm making this video because there are many reviews out there which are only showing the features and the pros. But over the last 2 weeks I used it as my primarily a B camera for stills and for video, and I found a lot of limitations, smaller ones, bigger ones, at least for me. And so I thought, why not make a video about it? Especially because this camera is basically sold within the next hour or so. There's someone coming to grab this camera. And so, yeah, I also have to admit that this video will be kind of a quick and dirty video without much of footage or clips shot with the camera or of the body and so on, because I don't have the time to do this. I will primarily talk about the problems, and you, by the way, don't take them as granted. Try the camera out in a local store and yeah, decide by yourself, are these cons really important for you, or are the cons maybe, or the limitations are maybe okay for you and for your shooting purposes. But yeah, before I'm talking too long and I'm babbling too long as always, let's start with the limitations. The first one is, for me personally, the most major one is the battery runtime. You only get about 1 hour of battery runtime with internal batteries. There is an option to connect external power sources, for example, over the multi-interface port. But the problem is, even with a small power bank, which is the best choice for mobile usage, you only get about 2 hours of runtime, 2 up to 3. And if you don't want to use external power sources, because there's also always the risk that you break the USB port, especially on a shoulder rig, with a gimbal in a crowd, if you're shooting, for example, concerts or so, or with a gimbal where it's always risky because it's maybe tipping over, or if you put it on the table that, for example, the full stress is on the USB port. If you don't want to do this and you want to shoot over a whole day, let's say 6, 7, 8 hours, you need 6, 7 or 8 batteries. Especially compared to my A camera, the GH4, it's a mess because even with this Petona third-party Petona premium battery, it lasts easily about 4 hours, 30 minutes or so. And with the original one, I even reached, I think, over 5 hours once, recording time, not standby time. And here, the Sony cameras overall are really, really bad. The A7 series, A7 II series, the A6300, the new one, the RX10 series, all have really, really bad battery runtime. And this is really a letdown, because let's say you mount this to a gimbal, you mount this to a shoulder rig, you cannot always unmount the camera to switch the battery at the bottom. And although there is also the option to use an external DC coupler, it's always risky to use external batteries. And I also had problems with my battery systems with the GH2 and the GH4 because I had ground loops according to the audio, because I connected multiple devices to one battery, and it's always risky and you need to test it out before using. So the battery runtime is really the most limiting factor of this camera, especially for professional use. By the way, also keep in mind that you need many of those, and these are also not that cheap, about 15, 20 bucks or so a piece, with 8 pieces plus the charger, because there's also no external charger included, only this wall plug adapter to charge the battery inside the camera. Yeah, it's getting quite expensive. At least 100 to 150 bucks you need to calculate just for batteries. By the way, if you plan to get a charger, this Petona brand, or you also get it under other brands, is really nice because you can also check your battery status. For example, this is at 100%. And this is also nice to check your batteries before shooting. But yeah, to get back to the limitations, battery runtime, the first big limitation. The second limitation, which I wanted to talk about, is the lens. And the lens, and you can see it already, I have it at f4. The problem is that the lens is really soft at f2.8. This is a limitation for video, in 4K especially, and also for stills. Plus, it's only a 1-inch sensor, which is really nice because it's super fast according to rolling shutter. It has superb color rendition and dynamic range, even better than older Micro Four Thirds sensors. It's also really good in low light. But because the lens is really soft at f2.8, and you need to stop down to 3.5 or f4, yeah, all these pros are gone. And especially in 4K, you need to stop down a little bit, because otherwise the corners and edges are really soft, and the overall image is also really soft at f2.8. Plus you get a fringing, purple fringing by the way, and it's really ruining your image. Beside that, it's also, first I thought that I can use it as a camcorder replacement or as a real hybrid, and I bought this Foatgar RMVS1, which cost me just 15 bucks. It's a good accessory if you plan to buy a camera with multi-interface port, because this is running basically with all the cameras. But the problem with this camera, together with this camera, is that the zoom is really unstable. The lens overall wobbles, and you can see the wobbling on the images as soon as you change the zooming direction, because the whole image is jumping. Plus, there is also a huge bump at around 90 to 100 millimeters, because I think there is a double helix inside this lens, because it's extending really long, as you can see here. And the problem is that you see this bump at around 100 millimeters extremely in your footage. And this is really bad, because at first I plan to use this on a shoulder rig and on a gimbal. And the problem is, especially on a shoulder rig, if you plan to zoom with the remote on the grip, for example, you always need the range around 90-100 millimeters, and you always go around this range if you want to make a close-up from interviewing someone, for example. And especially on a tripod, on a shoulder rig, it's maybe okay because you're wobbling overall a little bit, but on a tripod you see it extremely. And this is a real limitation, and this destroys the purpose of a camcorder replacement or of a true video stills hybrid. And by the way, I also found out that, you maybe saw and know about the stepped aperturing here. You can also declick with this button here, and then you have a stepless aperture control. The problem is it's only declicked mechanically according to the ring. This doesn't mean that the electronics are also reacting steplessly. You still have 1/3 aperture steps in your footage. And so, sure, it's better because you don't have the clicks on your audio if you're recording internally audio, and you also don't see the clicks in the image because you have it over the body, and maybe the stabilizer is confused or so. But it's only a halfway solution, because it's no real stepless aperture according to the footage and according to the iris control. And I don't know why they made this halfway solution. It makes no sense in my opinion. Okay, this was the second big point, the lens aperture zooming wobbly mechanics issue. And the third issue I had, and this is also quite big, is the push AF. All Sony cameras without a touchscreen, and also here is no touchscreen, they don't have a push AF. And this means you are in manual mode, for example, where the switch is here, for example, you are in manual mode, and you want to enable the AF just once, which is really easy with Panasonic cameras. You can even use a remote with half press. Half press is the push AF, and full press is stopping video. Not possible here because you can take stills while shooting video, and so this button is not freely adjustable. The problem is that there is absolutely no option to force the AF. You only get the options of fully manual control or full autofocus control. You get tracking, which is you can enable in the menu, and you make a press at the menu button, and it's tracking really nicely, which is okay for interview shots, because as long as the picture is bright enough, it's not losing the image. But the problem is, as soon as it's getting a little bit darker, the AF is not that precise anymore, because it's a contrast AF only. There are no face detection points, and because you also need to shoot at f4 to get a good image, it's struggling even faster. And the problem is, as soon as it loses the focus point, it's hunting around, and this is also a little bit of a problem with taking stills with this camera. The AF system is fast with good lighting conditions, but it's not the best in bad lighting conditions. So this camera is more usable, in my opinion, also on the video side. It's a real hybrid. So it's not perfect in both worlds, according to both worlds. And so take this or keep this in mind. It's also not possible, by the way, to use the DMF focus. DMF focus is, this second here. A DMF is you can autofocus, and if you want to adjust the focus additionally because it missed, for example, you can use the ring to control this focus. But this is also not possible with the video mode. It would be great, for example, to have this enabled. If you turn the ring, it's disabling the AF, and if you want to enable it again, just use one of the function buttons, for example. Wouldn't be that much of an issue to program, and I'm programming myself, so I know that it's not that much of an issue to program this. And it would be great, but it's not working. There's no option to get a push AF, and because it's also losing the AF, the tracking AF, very often. And because you cannot choose that easily the focus point, because there is no touchscreen, it's really, really a mess and not really usable for my purposes, I have to say. Yeah, I also mentioned here the non-articulating screen. The problem is that you also cannot turn it over and close it down so it's protected while transporting. And this I really, really recognize, because with the GH4, I just turn the screen, close it, and I don't never ever needed a screen protector for my Panasonic cameras, because I had, for example, the G6, the G7, the GH2, the GH3, the GH4, and all these cameras had full articulating screens. Plus, you also don't have or get the option to use this camera for blogging or vlogging, let's call it that way, because you cannot see yourself, and this is really a letdown. Plus, yeah, you also always need to open it up, by the way, so it's cooling better with the camera, although it's also getting really hot, by the way. And it's easier with a fully articulating screen to put it sideways. By the way, also way easier and way better for a gimbal, because you can put it sideways and you see what you're shooting. With this camera, it's not possible. Yeah, this is also a real letdown, in my opinion. By the way, according to Heat, this camera is capable of being hacked. I installed the newest, I think, 1.3 firmware. I think it was 1.3. Also, the Sony hack is also working with this camera. And I removed the time limit, and it's working quite nice, even up to the 1 hour limit, or even longer with external power source. I didn't test it over 1 hour or so with direct sunlight, so take this with a grain of salt. But it's one of the Sony cameras which isn't overheating. Normally it shouldn't overheat. And by the way, with the hack you can also remove the NTC warning, and it's working quite nice and stable. At least I never had any problems with the hack, even with the newest 1.3 firmware. If you want or plan to unlock the camera. Okay, the next point, the HFR mode. This is one of the points which I really like about the camera, because the high frame rate mode you can choose here, with this here is with the option, is one of the unique features, and here the camera shines. I really love this camera for high frame rate shots, because you get at least up to 480 FPS, you get very good quality. 240 FPS is full sensor readout, 1080p, which is really unique on the market actually, and which you can blow up easily to 480 FPS with 50% slowdown, with time warp feature in Premiere, or with Twixtor Pro also. And the point is, for example, we use this for laboratory shots, for example, a concrete block pressed until it bursts, or steel rods which are bursting, or which are bursting. And for example, also plastic parts which got force until they broke, and so you can also see how they break and so on. And for such purposes, the high frame rate mode is a dream to use, together with the very nice focal range of 24 to 200 with the 2.8 aperture. And it's not that important to have the best sharpness at f2 at full wide open aperture, because high frame rate modes are basically of a lower quality, and it is the case at least over to 40 FPS in quality mode. And I really recommend this camera for high frame rate shots, especially if you plan to use it primarily for technical laboratory purposes. It's the only camera with the zoom range, it's the only camera with standard SD cards, it's the only camera in this price range which offers really good quality, extremely good quality to 40 FPS and good quality for 80 FPS. I don't recommend to use 960 FPS because it's garbage, because the resolution is too low and it's automatically upscaling to 1080p, and so the resolution is really weird, and you also need a lot of light for 960 FPS, by the way. But if you need 2 second or 4 second in time priority mode, high frame rate shots for special purposes, go for this camera. By the way, the limitations are you only get 2 seconds with higher picture quality, or as mentioned already, 4 seconds with time priority setting, but you're losing quality. And for 80 FPS, for example, it's looking like 960 FPS in 2 seconds mode if you choose a time priority. So I recommend to use quality priority most of the time. Also nice is you get 120 FPS constant shooting with audio on the other modes. To 40 for 80 and 960 are without audio. And yeah, this is really nice because 120 FPS you can also blow up easily to 40 FPS without visible artifacts. Normally you shouldn't get any visible artifacts. Where are the limitations? The limitations are the camera is really slow. You need to preset everything, focus all other settings, and then you need to go in the standby mode. So it's reading out the sensor constantly, and you can start or stop. You can also choose to stop, for example, after the action happened, and then it's writing the last 2 seconds. And this all takes a lot of time, and writing also takes a lot of time, especially in the 960 FPS mode takes over a minute or so, I think, to write down. And but at least before 80 FPS mode only takes 20 to 30 seconds or so, which is okay. Overall, the camera, I have to say, is also not the fastest one. Sometimes it also needs about 5 or 6 seconds to start up, especially if it's lying around longer time. I think it's going in a deeper sleep mode, because it also drains the battery, by the way, if you switch it off, and it's not lying that long around. So also always charge the battery before using it again, or keep a second charged battery in your bag, so you don't run out of battery, even if it's switched off. Okay, what I'm missing a little bit is a 240 FPS 720p mode, which would be a dream to have even with lower quality, because for example, including audio, so you can use the audio, and you can also shoot longer, and so you can also blow it up to 480 FPS 720. But it's not in there, and I'm really missing this mode. Beside that, the flash isn't tiltable, which I hate, because I really like to shoot indirectly. It's also not working with most Panasonic cameras, or just with the smaller ones. For example, the G7 and the GH4 are not coming with a tiltable flash either, but it would be nice to have one in there with the RX10 Mark II. And it's also a little bit more prone to moire, if you know what this is, aliasing and moire. It's on the same level as the G7, which is also a little bit worse than the GH4, but the GH4 is better in this aspect, especially if you're shooting vlog, it's even better. And if you're, for example, recording externally 1080p, it's really perfect, nearly perfect. Because I'm shooting 4K internally, or I'm choosing 4K internally with the GH4, and then I record externally with a Ninja Blade, and the image is just gorgeous, I have to say. So moire-wise, it's also only on par with the G7, not with the GH4. It's also more prone to overheating compared to the GH4, for example, which is staying really cool all the time. I don't know if it's really overheating in direct sunlight over a few hours, but I don't think that it's really necessary to test this. It's more important that it's at least working under normal conditions, indoor or in the shadows. And what I also miss is, and this is the last point I noted, is the synchro scan. Synchro scan or freeze scan, or however it is called with different manufacturers and models, is the option that you can sync in 0.1 hard steps to a certain light source, or to a computer monitor, to an ad which is, for example, behind the object or a subject. And this is really, really nice to have because, especially in my opinion, because I'm also shooting people in front of beamer pictures, in front of TVs, in front or before, in front of computer monitors. I also shoot, for example, sometimes smartphones or so if I don't want or if I don't have the time to capture it on the device. And here it's a dream to use to have a synchro scan feature. And don't get me wrong, it's maybe a kind of a unique feature not all people need, but it's really nice to have it in the GH4, and it's really missing here in the RX10 Mark II, especially at this price point. It would be great to have it. And although I have to say only the GH4 is delivering this and it's offering this, not the G7, not the G6, not the GX80, GX85, the new ones, the new small one with a stabilizer internally. But I really missed it in this camera at this price point. And don't forget, for example, a G7 with a new 12 to 60mm, which I'm using, by the way, actually with the GH4, is priced around 650 to 700 bucks actually. And this is priced around 1,200 bucks actually. And so I think it's more okay to don't have it in the G7 instead to don't have it in, or to miss it in this RX10 Mark II. Okay, a few pros I also noted here. The sensor is really, really good. It has a low rolling shutter. I didn't test if it's lower than the GH4, but as far as I can tell out of my memory, it's a little bit better. Dynamic range wise, picture quality wise, it's really nice. Stills and video wise, at least at f4 and upwards. Also, really good video AF is built in there, according the bumping, if you know what I'm talking about. With the GH4 and other Micro Four Thirds cameras, it bumps a little bit, and this is not the case here. It's zooming slowly, and just a little bit of adjustment is visible. And so here, AF-wise, the RX10 Mark II is also better, kind of. Beside that, it has no overheating problems like the other Sony cameras, the a6300, which got a new firmware 1.1 or 1.2 or what it's called, which is fixing a little bit the overheating problems. But for example, the A7R Mark II, the A7S Mark II, sometimes if you have it in direct sunlight, the a6300, the a6000, the older one, the Alpha 6000, all are overheating. And this is not that of a problem with this camera here. At least it ran for about 3 hours. Yeah, with 3 batteries. It's also possible to hack and to remove the time limit, which is also quite unique because normally you need the GH4 or the GH2 with a hack to get unlimited recording time, or you need a camcorder from Sony because basically the Sony cameras internally, they don't offer over 30 minutes of recording time. It's working here, even with the newest 1.3 firmware. And yeah, it's overall a good camera, I have to say. And if you search for camera for yourself to shoot stills, to shoot a little bit of video sometimes with your kids, for example, as a hobby camera, it's a good camera, at least if you keep in mind the limitations and if the limitations are not that important for you. But for professional use, for me personally, I don't recommend it. Yeah, okay, and that's it more or less. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I know that this is maybe a video many people will dislike because, of different approaches to the camera and because the limitations are maybe not that important to themselves. I just wanted to tell you and to show you the limitations. So I hope that this video helped someone out there. And yeah, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye.